Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's take another look at this cover and talk about the photo compositing that I actually did to make this cover, because what it is not is a couple of models that got hired to take a picture. It's not a painting. It's a bunch of photographs that I basically pasted together to look like what I wanted them to look like. And this is actually not the most complicated composite I've done, because it's really just a scene. It's a medieval street picture that I used, two models, sort of, and then some background that I created. I've done other composites, like for some of the needle ash books, that involve multiple layers of background scenery to create something that is not real. In this case, this is a real street somewhere. I actually don't know where it is, but it had the right emotion to me, which was kind of cramped, ancient looking, kind of mixtures of architecture. But I want to talk about how I technically approached creating this composite in order to make this cover, because people seem to really like it. First of all, let's talk about design techniques again, because that is probably the more essential thing to understand, rather than like how to operate something in Photoshop. There's a bunch of different ways to do something in Photoshop. Some ways are efficient, some are not efficient. Who cares? What matters is that you actually have the design right. So first of all, if you go back to my cover design basics video, there's a central image and then there's auxiliary images. So the central image is going to be the humanizing element in this, or the human element, which is going to be this woman with a hood over her head. And also this man standing behind her, also wearing a hood with his face mostly obscured. And then you have auxiliary elements, which is going to be the moon, which is actually not our moon, but an alien planet an artist made that I turned into a moon. Clouds, lightning, with this only splash of color that really exists in this cover. And then, of course, the street. Those are the auxiliary elements. The elements that also give you a clue as to what you're actually looking at as far as setting. The sword helps the setting, but so does this medieval-looking town. The lightning, all of that works. The foreign moon. So let's take a look at what I did here. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide the snapshot I did. Whenever I export, not always, but I'll frequently use the snapshot command, which I think is Control-Shift-Alt-E on Photoshop. Let's actually try it. Yep, there, that created a new one. So I use that because, for some reason, sometimes when you're exporting an image, the lens flares won't show up right. There's lots of things that won't show up right. So if that's the case, you just take a snapshot and it will get rid of that. So let's get rid of the text effects. I've talked about text effects before. We're just going to hide those. We're going to hide the shiny bits, and we're going to hide the title text. Now we're just looking at the image. So going from the front to back, let's talk about what I put in here. The first thing I put is actually a vignette. That's what the image looks like without it. So the vignette darkens the edges. The vignette's very easy to do. There's a mask layer on it. I don't know why. Probably because I just didn't bother to get rid of the mask. Here's what I did. There's an inner shadow and a gradient overlay. So if I remove those, that's what it looks like. The inner shadow just adds this just darkening to the edges. And then you have a gradient overlay, which is kind of turned down. That's a color burn overlay that just really makes the darks darker on the edges, makes the street just kind of disappear to nothingness at the bottom, and makes everything else just not get darkened as much. You could do a regular one as well, but I find that the color burn, because it works with the darkness of the colors, will have a tendency to have a more subtle effect, and so I like it for this use. So that's the vignette. If we go down here, this is just a brightness adjustment, and you may have to do this once you get to the top layers to just kind of get everything in here, because the clouds are too bright. We need to bring those down a little bit, bring this up. This is a vignette that I probably tossed that I was just working with. Now, as I'm working actually with a composite, let me show you this. This was one of the working images. You can see that the woman was not exporting right, so that's one of the reasons I did a snapshot. So as I was working with this, I actually will create a layer, and I'll just show you how to do it, of hue and saturation that takes out all the color. Either makes it all one color, the color that I want to work with, whatever color is important for the genre. So if it's blue or gray or green, whatever color I really feel like I need to be working with, I will make it that color. So just as an example, I'll turn this one off. You can see that there's just a smattering of colors that look awful. A lot of times people will stick photos together like this and have that be the cover because they're imagining a colorful painting. But you'll find that really good fantasy paintings often have very few colors compared to a real photograph. So we want to get rid of some of those colors. And so for that, we bring in a layer that's just going to desaturate everything quite a bit. You can see the saturation is fairly low. So I might create a new one that's just hue saturation layer. Go to colorize, and it'll turn everything one color. Like if you want to work with the sepia tone, which is a great flavor. Blue is going to have this, which is the actual color I worked with, is going to have a more mysterious effect. And notice it looks black and white, even though it's blue. Just kind of one of the effects of blue. If you go to something like purple or pink, you're communicating different things. Red, likewise. Green tends to be more adventure and magic. So I used blue. And so I just kind of decided on a blue about there, kind of blue to aqua. And just once with that layer on, that's what I used to do the blending. Because I didn't have to worry about blending colors. We don't want to worry about that. We just want to worry about blending the images together. And just a really subtle hint of color in the middle just makes it feel like it's a colorful image, even though this is all a blue-green when you actually look at it. So that's important. I always work with a single color when I'm doing these kinds of composites, because then I don't have to worry about having to match color grading, and you're just focusing on the emotion of the cover as you work the images together. And so continuing from front to back, let's peel off this vignette. Here's what we have here. You can see there's some fog I added, which is showing up a little bit more as I get rid of the vignette. We'll take off the hue saturation layer so we can see the colors. There's this woman. There she is. There she's not. But it's actually not one image. There's several images here. Let me turn that back on so you can just, again, I like to work with that single color. So there's some fog that just is there for emotional purposes, just to kind of add a little bit of extra noise to the image. This is her hood. So what I did is I selected her hood. Let me pull off both of these, all these layers. Here's the original image I started with at the bottom. Okay, and actually there's a lens flare behind her, as you can see. So this is the original image I started with the woman, and her face wasn't visible. I wanted a face, and I wanted a beautiful face. So I just found a face that I thought was beautiful and created a mask layer and erased everything that kind of wasn't the face and her hair. And then I hid that, and I just selected this hood and made that a new layer and put her face. This is just a layer to darken and create some shadows, and this just obscured her face. So these are some shadows I painted on to blend this a little bit and make it seem like there was some shadow going on. But we got these beautiful lips to just really draw you in and make you think of a beautiful woman who's hiding her face. I think it just worked great. Now I could have done this by actually really bringing up the brightness of the original model's face, but I just thought, well, since I'm doing that anyway, might as well just find a really beautiful woman to put there. And that's her, that's the girl. So let me hide her. Let's look at the guy. I'm going to show you something interesting about, I've used this guy's stock photos a couple times. If you're going to shoot photos for stock photos, please don't wear Converse sneakers. So this guy's wearing modern sneakers, which means I have to hide his feet. But this is actually a trick to blending these images together, is because perspective is so hard to create without obscuring it, because his feet, he really doesn't look like he's part of this at all. Of course, he has no shadow. All you have to really be able to do is to hide his feet. And so the way I hid his feet is it's behind the woman. So because his feet are behind the woman, you cannot see him. So we hide the Converse sneakers and we hide the problem with the perspective, and there he is. There he does have a couple of effects on him, as does the woman. So if I look at her effects, she has an inner shadow that's yellow with a color dodge effect. If I turn that off, this is just to create some back shading from this lightning that's here. Okay, that's what that does. And I did roughly the same thing with him. Here's, cut him out using a mask layer, and there's an inner shadow, and then there's that's this yellow. the color dodge, and then there's an outer glow that just kind of lights up that fog there. And then there's another layer. There's a lens flare behind him, and there's a little bit of fog behind him as well that just gets lit up by that outer glow pretty nicely, I think. Let's turn him off and continue going backwards. Oh, let's just turn the entire woman off, not... There we go. So here we are on this. I did create some fog after I had mixed everything together, just to glue everything together. We end up with this. Let's turn off that fog. I could turn off some of the selective color work I did here to really make this very gray. That's the street. So the street is all one picture, and I didn't really do much to it. I just selected where it was. The only thing I did do is there was a manhole cover right here, and I used there's like a blemish correction tool that you can use. Where is it? Is it that one? No, it's not that one. There's a blemish correction tool that you can use somewhere in here that will actually just let you cover that up. Where is it? I almost never use it. Yeah, like the magic eraser tool. Is that it? I don't remember. So yeah, I used one that would correct the blemishes pretty nicely. Oh, there it is. The spot healing brush tool. So there's a couple here that you can do. All I did was select the manhole cover, and it just filled it in with the correct texture. Okay. So there you go. Let's keep going backwards. Let's remove the town. Now we have a couple of images here I blended together. It's in group one. The clouds. So the clouds I put in one group. The first cloud is this one on the top. So I just got a picture of clouds with the black background, and I set the blending to be slightly off so that black was transparent, and there we have the clouds. If we keep going back, I turned off, this is a hue saturation to make that yellow. I used, this is just a picture of some lightning striking in a field. And I blended that with these clouds here. And I just did that by painting the mask black and just doing a semi-transparent brush that was black, 35% opacity or so, and just kind of blend it together, and no one notices that those clouds are actually separate things. Clouds tend to blend pretty well together, so you can always mix a couple of pictures of clouds together and they work really well. We go get rid of that. Here's the moon. Looks like that. The hue saturation is on, but it's not even visible. And so the moon was really easy. I just cut it out. It was an artist's CG moon on a background. And then this layer here, stars. I have a brush that does stars specifically. And you can look up people who want to do stars. There's a couple star brushes. It's dots with jitter, and you just make some stars. Make some cool stars, and then the black background. And so as we move up through the layers, you can see them building. Clouds, yellow lightning, clouds. We have a town with lightning in the middle. We have some bright fog. It's getting brighter. We have a dude that's flashing behind. Then we have a woman. And if we keep going, I don't think that levels adjustment was working. We have eventually a vignette, which darkens everything, and then we finally get the title text, and then a whole bunch of different little lens flares that make that pop out, and there's the cover. That's how I built it. Okay, so you can do a lot of the same stuff. I'll maybe do like a live demo on how to make a composite and start from scratch and figure out what kind of things you want to mix together. That's how I did that one, and so you could do one like that as well. There's a lot of actually big book covers that are really simple combinations, like a dude in a hood on a grass background. That's Name of the Wind. I've already done a video on how to do that one. So you'd be surprised how effective this sort of cover can actually be. And so anyway, if you want to read this book, make sure you're on my mailing list, bbspress.com/list, and I'll probably send that out to people. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.